My name is Edward Gunderson. I'm 78 years young, living quiet and small, in the kind of Montana place where the sky goes on forever and the trains are the only things that holler at night. You see me now. White beard, calloused fingers, 3 lazy barn cats who steal my chair. And you'd never imagine the things those hands have held, or the debt those eyes once kept vigil over. Folks around here call me Herb Pop, because I know a thing or two about what the land can mend. I bake for the neighbors, I mend fences, and I tend my little plot of lavender and chamomile like it's a Bible, but you don't come here for pie recipes. You come for the story I buried for 50 years, until the soil finally let it breathe again. If you like what you hear, do me a favor. Thumbs up, subscribe, and tell someone who's been hurt and might find something in my voice. Because this is not a tale for the faint of heart. This is what happened when the person you trusted most decided science mattered more than a family. And what happens when a man learns that patience can be a weapon as sharp as any blade. I was born in 1947 in a 2-room cabin close enough to Yellowstone that smoke from winter fires painted our windows orange. My father, George, trapped and hunted. My mother, Irene, was the one with the hands that healed. She ground roots and leaves the way some people pray. From her, I learned the names of plants and the quiet theology of tending. I was the oldest of 5, me, Johnny, Isaac, Sarah, and little David. We had a rooster named Ruas that crowed like the day had no choice but to start when I was 12. She brought him to the potluck at St. Michael's. He had a notebook under his arm and eyes like a winter creek, still and hungry. Evelyn Maxwell, Evelyn Maxwell, arrived on a train from the city and spoke with such refinement folk listened as if they were in church. She called herself a scientist, a visiting researcher, a woman of letters who wanted to know the lore of our plants. She smiled at Mama like a benefactor and at Daddy like a man who'd just seen a trophy. There was something in the way Evelyn looked at me that made the hair at the back of my neck stand up. Not the kind of look a teacher gives a promising student. It was the look of a cataloger, of someone measuring the grain in a sack and deciding if the flour was worth the price. She visited us more and more. She brought sweets, books, coal for winter. She asked questions about my body, how I grew, how I handled cold, what kinds of chores I could do. Daddy beamed. Mama thought it was for the best. Who would not want their hard scrub boy to be noticed by someone from the city? At 15, Evelyn said she had secured a place for me in a technical school. She painted Denver in colors that made my parents' eyes water. It will be a better life for our boy, Daddy said, and I believed them both because what else are children to believe but their elders? We never made it to Denver. We stopped in Salt Lake City for what she called a detour. 2 days later, she took the long road and the trees closed like a shutter. Her house was an old estate tucked behind pine, a main house with a study and a small annex that smelled of disinfectant and ink. She greeted me like a father might greet a prodigy and told me the greatest lies under the softest voice. She said she was a professor in behavioral science, dismissed by jealous colleagues, a pioneer doomed to work alone. She told me she only wanted to study human limits. She taught me to read better, to write, to understand the language of measurement. For a while, there were moments that felt like learning. Then the learning contorted into something filthy. Evelyn was methodical. She was precise. At first, the experiments were harmless. Nights without sleep, foods withheld, isolation. She would take notes. I would answer questions. Then she told me we'd be married. I was 17. She was 42. The papers were signed. She said it was for legitimacy, for appearances. She said it was to ensure my cooperation. My parents, who thought themselves wise and had been dazzled by scholarship, signed too, in ink that would feel like a lie for the rest of their lives. Marriage removed the last bars. Evelyn stopped pretending to pretend. She showed me her notebooks, tears, heart rates, skin pallor, notes on moral resilience. And when I had my first child, Lucas, in 1965, Evelyn's eyes glinted like a woman who'd just been gifted a new instrument. Now we can study generational effects, she said. Later came Myron, Jonas, and little Rosie. Children who should have been taught how to fish and mend a fence were taught to be variables. Evelyn's centerpiece of cruelty was elegant in its horror. She would put me in a chair and teach my children how to apply calibrated pain. "This is not malice," she would say. "This is science. We are privileged." She spoke as if she were breaking bread with saints. Owen, Lucas, in my telling, was 6 the first time she forced his small hands to pinch hard enough to make me flinch. Myron learned to hold a candle close enough to sting my skin until the smell of burned hair was something she swallowed without looking away. Jonas became the one who fought internally, trying to sabotage the sessions, and for that he paid in hunger and solitude. Rosie, the littlest, was taught to smile through it. "You are helping Daddy," she was told. Her hands trembled like leaves while they did what they'd been ordered. No one outside our walls knew. Evelyn had means and manners. She was a woman of reputation in some circles. She recorded, annotated, cross-referenced. She would catalogue the exact moment pity flickered across my face and mark it with an asterisk. She told the children if they refused, they would be studied for disobedience or, worse, punished. She used love like a wedge. "If you love him, you'll do this." She used fear like a calendar. "If you fail, you will not eat until you learn." I tried to run twice. The first time she caught me and turned my attempt into a new measure of endurance. The second time she punished the children in front of me until I wished the ground would swallow us whole. Each punishment fed her notebooks. She saw everything as data. She wanted patterns and she wanted them pure. If you had told me that a man could learn gentleness under that roof, I would have laughed and cried at the same time. I learned other things, how to hide anger so it didn't register on a thermometer, how to make my face like a placid lake so observers would think the storm had passed. I learned patience, not the kind that waits for the mail, but a surgical patience that plans a lifetime into a single breath. There came a night in 1977 when Jonas, then 12, looked at me differently. In his eyes, I saw not the drilled obedience of a child trained to obey, but the long, slow, luminous return of human things. Regret, shame, a hunger to be forgiven. That small glance tightened something in me that had been stretched so thin it almost cut. I was 30, hollowed by years of experiments and betrayals, but I had a purpose that outlived the fear. I promised myself 2 things: that Evelyn would answer for what she had done, and that if it came to it, I would not let her claim my children as instruments any longer. I did not become a monster overnight. I became patient like a trapper watching a trail. I waited until Evelyn grew reckless with success, until she believed her control was absolute. I learned the pattern of her nights, the places she kept her keys, the cadence of her laughter when she thought no harm could touch her. I cultivated small rebellions in my children, a look that said, "I see you," a hiding of a small needle, a swapped label. Each tiny act was a seed. When the time came, I did not raise a hand blindly. I used what she had taught us about precision against her. I turned her obsessions into a cage. We sabotaged her instruments so measurements read nothing. Jonas, brave, stubborn, trembling, hid the notebooks and smeared them with vitriol so many of her charts would be unreadable. Lucas, who had learned cruelty as a defense, feigned greater cruelty until Evelyn's own patterns betrayed her. Rosie, who had been taught to confide her innocence to me, brought what she could from the kitchen and left forgotten marks. It was not some sudden heroic scene with a rope and a storm. It was the slow unmaking of a woman who thought she had catalogued and therefore mastered us. Evelyn found herself in a maze of her own making, notes that made no sense, instruments that recorded nothing, children who offered nothing useful. She began to panic in the measured way a scientist panics when her hypothesis collapses. Then the lawyers, people she thought loyal, came with the right questions. The authorities, when they finally saw the house, saw only the noise of a lifetime of cruelty distilled into evidence. Evelyn was taken away. She sat in a cell for years, Papers and crosses she had once used to mark our pain, now marking her downfall. Did I kill her? No, we made sure the law took what we could not take into our own hands. There are rules, even for those who have been broken. Not everyone gets the same kind of justice, but the scale tipped. My children, scarred, weird, and whole in strange ways, were freed from being instruments. We rebuilt as best we could. Jonas learned to laugh without flinching. Lucas learned to be gentle. Myron learned to cry without being punished. Rosie became small and fierce and tended the hens. We spent years like miners, chipping away at the rust that Evelyn had left on our souls. Now I sit on my porch in late afternoons and prune the rosemary. Patches, Rusty, and Willow, yes, 3 cats, no coincidence, circle my feet. Sometimes the grandchildren from Bozeman come. They climb the fence and inhale the bergamot, as if the world has not been cruel for them. Evelyn rots in a place made of grey and fluorescent light, and there are nights I go to sleep and imagine her notebooks burning in a thunderstorm. There are other nights I forgive myself for the ways I broke inside so that my children might break no more. People ask me, on these channel videos and at potlucks, whether I believe in taking justice into your own hands. I tell them this: there are moments when the law is enough and moments when it isn't. I also tell them that revenge is a poor teacher. Patience is the better tutor. There is a vast difference between becoming like the monster who hurt you and using every remaining inch of your humanity to shelter those you love. I'm not proud of the hard things I had to do in the dark. I'm grateful I had the courage to wait until the light made a path. If you have been hurt, if someone used the guise of knowledge to do what love should have prevented, know this: you are not alone. You do not have to answer cruelty with cruelty. You must answer it with care, with cunning when necessary, and with the stubborn, small acts of everyday life that, in the end, are more devastating to tyranny than any explosion. Tend your garden. Teach your children the names of the herbs. Let the rosemary remind you that roots can be deep and patient and, when they need to be, fierce. That's my story. I'll keep telling it as long as there are ears willing to listen. If it helps one person sit a little straighter in the dark, then these old bones have done their work. Now go on, wash your hands, kiss the folks you love, and if you like this, please leave a like and share it. Tell me in the comments, do you believe there are times when waiting and planning is the kinder kind of justice?